Some people are writing and saying there's a libertarian moment in our country. I think the best way to find that out is what group would people rather be in? YAL, college Republicans, college Democrats? I'm thinking maybe YAL. What do you think? You may have heard, you remember what they were saying about Domino's. Domino's admitted, you know what, our crust sucks, okay? But we're admitting it. It sucks, and we're going to do something different. We're going to present ourselves in a better way. We're going to make a better crust. The content of what you are as a pizza or what you stand for as a party makes a difference. So really it is about content as much as it is brand and presentation. Some people say, well, the Republican Party can be good again and can be great again. We just have to have better, words. You have to stand for something. I've been saying over and over again, a political party is an empty vessel unless you imbue it with values. And we have to decide what we stand for. We have to decide really what is the Republican Party? What are we? What do we stand for? What is the Leave Me Alone coalition all about? I had lunch yesterday with a young father. He has a 2-year-old child. And his child, unfortunately, has a seizure disorder and has 100 seizures a day. And he wants to try some other therapies because he's tried 8 different seizure medications and they don't work. So he's moved to Colorado so he can use cannabis oil, which they actually take most of the THC out of. But here's my point. I want the politicians to come up here and answer me why they would prevent this little girl from having something that might help her with her seizures. Who are these politicians that say we can't even have medical marijuana? We're going to send the federal government in, and if someone prescribes THC or not THC, cannabis oil for seizures, we're going to put them in jail? I mean, what a ridiculous notion. And so really, if we're talking about what the content of what we're for, it's leave me the hell alone. Leave me the hell alone. My medical decisions are my decisions. My private life is my private life. Leave me alone. But one thing that really gets my goat is you'll meet people on occasion. You'll meet people and they'll be extraordinarily wealthy, which I'm fine with that. I'm all for people getting rich. But the thing is what annoys me is that they don't appreciate the system. They now may be worth $100 million or $500 million, and they spend their money disparaging the very system that allowed them to get there. And I think of the differences in systems. You think the differences between capitalism and socialism and how it's sort of underappreciated. People just think, oh, I just got rich, it just appeared. And there was no system. Or maybe I was just so brilliant I became rich, but there was no system that allowed them to be rich. I think back to the story, there was a story Reagan told when he was going to meet Gorbachev, and he said he was going to tell the story, and his staff said, don't tell the story, there will be an international incident. But like Reagan sometimes did, he did what the hell he wanted to do. And so he told the story. And the story was this guy, it was an accountant in Moscow, and he had saved up for years and years, he wanted to buy a car. And it took forever to get enough money to buy a car, 10 years to buy a car. And there was only one crappy company, the Hugo, or not the Hugo, it may have been, I don't know. It was a Soviet car, it was one company, one car. He saves for 10 years and he goes in, he gets a car, and he puts his money down the counter, and the bureaucrat, the state bureaucrat that ran the dealership, looked at him and just said, well, that's all fine and well. Come back in 10 years and you can pick it up. And the guy didn't miss a beat. He said, will that be on a Tuesday or a Wednesday? And the guy looked at him and said, you idiot, I just told you it's going to be 10 years. And you want to know whether it'll be a Tuesday or Wednesday? And he said, yeah, the plumber's coming on Tuesday. Nobody gets rich under socialism. Everybody's impoverished under socialism. When you compare the systems of capitalism to socialism, it's really not so much that the rich get rich. The rich there's always somebody who's rich under every system. The difference is you get rich under capitalism if you produce something somebody wants. If you voluntarily get someone to buy your stuff. If you have a great idea, someone buys your stuff. You get rich under socialism if you know somebody, if you're their crony. Happens in crony capitalism as well. But you have to appreciate that one of the great things about capitalism is its meritocracy. If there is no coercion, If government isn't involved in the exchanges, it's based on your merit. You think back to the greatness of the founding of our country, and you think, what was so different about America from Europe? For the first time, we had a meritocracy, not only capitalism, but in all forms of government. Think about all the people through time who'd been excluded from government and excluded really from the economy. First, the royals had all the privilege. So if you weren't royal, the chances of you doing anything extraordinary, discovering the light bulb, discovering electricity, discovering the internet, I guess it was Al Gore did that, but the thing is none of these things that sort of, think of what all was prevented by excluding certain classes of people. Think what was prevented throughout the history of most of our recorded history by excluding women. So capitalism is this thing that it includes everyone. People want to talk about inclusiveness. Capitalism's absolutely inclusive. In fact, capitalism punishes people who do discriminate. Because if you want to discriminate based on who you sell your products to, you're not going to be very successful. But capitalism has this extraordinary ability to lift people up. There's a story, I think it's from a small village in China in 1978. In China, the farms were all collective, same as the Soviet Union. Everybody owned the land and nobody owned the land. And so in 1978, in a small village in the remote area, there'd been famine after famine. And so a few of the farmers in the small village got together in secret at their own peril, and they wrote a contract for the village. And they said something extraordinary. They said, we're going to divide up the land and let each family own the land. We can't tell the government we're going to do this, and then we're going to let you keep what you grow in surplus. They got the contract, and they rolled it all up and stuck it in bamboo and hid it into the hut in the village of the leader of the village. But the thing about it is they also put a clause in there, and they said, if any of us are caught, if any of us are executed, the other farmers will take care of the family and the kids. And you think of the extraordinary, risk they went to try to get something that we take for granted, to try to get a grasp of freedom. But the other extraordinary thing is it worked. And all of a sudden, instead of having famine, they had surplus, and they had crops galore. And some of China opened up. There's still a great deal of problems in China, but they began to see a glimmer of hope as to what would happen if the individual were allowed to produce and claim the fruits of their production. But we're sort of losing that, and we have lost that in our country in the sense that we have so many who have no idea what the benefits of capitalism are. But if you want to look at the history sort of the Cold War, the history of the Cold War was that the engine of capitalism defeated the engine of socialism. If you want to look at the history of humanitarianism and charitableness and giving and helping people who are in lesser circumstances, it comes from wealth. It comes from capitalism. You see the earthquake in Haiti and you see the devastation. Where did some money come from? Billions of dollars privately from the United States was given to Haiti. You see when the tsunami happened in Southeast Asia, billions of dollars privately from the United States. That wealth doesn't exist in Cuba. Wealth doesn't exist in the Soviet Union, or at least the old Soviet Union. If we don't appreciate, though, the foundation of where wealth comes from, we're going to lose it, though. And so it really does gall me, and it's appalling that you get people who come into our way of life and have no idea and no appreciation of where wealth is generated from. If we don't understand that, we won't get any farther in our life. It also is appalling that there are people within our community of government who think they know better. They know better about your privacy. They know better about everything. They know better about how you should spend your money. We've been having this debate about allowing companies to bring their money home. Right now it's 35% tax, corporate tax here. It's also 35% if you bring it home, even if you've paid your taxes somewhere else. So we've had this debate, and the Democrats, some of them are kind of leaning towards maybe allowing some of it to come home at a lower rate. There's $2 trillion overseas. But then they immediately say, well, we'll only let them bring it home if we can have controls, if we can control how they spend it. We need to make sure that they spend it in an appropriate way. And I'm like, you think you're smarter than Tim Cook, who runs Apple? What business did you run? It's one of the biggest companies in America. They're one of the biggest taxpayers in America. And some politician that got elected in Washington thinks they should tell them how to run their company. I try to explain to them, we will have a tax, and it's the job of the people in government to spend the tax money. It's not your job to spend their money. That's their job to spend their money. There's their money and there's the tax money. But they don't quite get it. It's not enough for them just to spend the tax money. They've got to have their hands in everything. And it's really what stops sort of progress from going on around here. But it's this, as Hayek talked about it, it's this pretense of knowledge. The central planners think that they have enough knowledge to manage the economy and that they know better than we do. But that's sort of the consistency of the theme of the Leave Me Alone coalition, the Libertarian coalition, the people who believe in limited government, is that we don't believe that we know better than others how to spend your money, what to do with your business, what to do with your privacy, what to do with your phone calls. We frankly think that it's none of the government's damn business what we say on our phone. From a political point of view, this is something enormous that's never, ever been tried. My dad often talked about it. It's unifying those who believe in economic liberty with those who believe in personal liberty. Bringing the two spheres of liberty together also has an enormous coalition. There can be people from the right, there can be people from the left. There can be people like myself who work with progressives on certain issues, such as the NSA, who work with progressives on certain issues, such as lessening the criminal penalties or allowing states to do things with regard to drugs. So I was having a great day today, and then I went to MSNBC. So they want to pounce and get me into a discussion, about civil liberties, private property, and all the intersection in between. And I said, look, I'll come back and we'll have a great philosophical discussion after I see you go on the air for 24 hours and apologize for all the lousy lies you've been saying about me for 4 years. I'm thinking I won't be back on soon. But if they come through with it and they want to apologize for 24 hours for making up stuff about my positions, I'll consider it. But really, there is an intersection for honest progressives. And I don't include MSNBC because I don't think they have many. They have a couple. But they have they have partisan cranks and hacks is what ends up happening is you got people who make everything into a partisan battle. I go on their network with Senator Cory Booker, who's a progressive Democrat who I'm personally friends with, and someone who I honestly agree with. And we've been promoting some of this criminal justice reform, trying to take things that are felonies and make them misdemeanors, trying to expunge records of people who made mistakes as kids, trying to fix some of these problems. And we're trying to make this not a partisan issue to show that actually Republicans and Democrats can get it, but you go on a network who wants to make everything about partisanship. So really there are some answers to how we figure out and how we move forward on a lot of these issues. And the other thing I've been telling people is that the one thing I've learned since I've been up here is you really can't pass these enormous bills where everybody agrees on everything. We should narrow the focus of some of these things. Are there areas of immigration reform that we could pass immediately? Yes. Are there areas on criminal justice reform that we could pass immediately? Yes. We just need to narrow the focus to find aspects of these things that we agree on. One thing that sort of fundamentally is at an impasse is things like tax policy. Most likely because the other side thinks that you aren't smart enough to spend your money. They think you're not smart enough to make your health decisions, but really they also feel like they have some sort of possession or some sort of right to your labor and to your money, so they think they can direct how you spend your money. And that's a real problem for us. So they think that the money is better spent if it comes and they sort of direct it. They're great knowledge. They're going to direct the economy. They want you to send more money, and we frankly think more money in the hands of the people, more money in the hands of the states and the cities, more money left out of Washington is more productive and will create more jobs. And there is a fundamental difference between us because they think you collect the money, someone in Washington says, then we'll give it to Mr. Smith and Mr. Smith will create jobs. But where they're fundamentally wrong is that 9 times out of 10, small businesses fail. And so if I'm going to choose who the small business is that should succeed, the politician will be wrong 9 times out of 10. Whereas if we give the money back to the people who are earning it by lowering their taxes, it will stimulate the economy because the money's going to be going back to those who the consumers already voted upon. The consumer votes every day. Some of these progressives say, oh, I'm for democracy. Well, you know what the ultimate democracy is? It's democratic capitalism. I think there is a moment that has come to the country where the word libertarian or the leave me alone coalition or the limited government types is the majority, if not the plurality of the country. People aren't really happy saying I'm a Republican or a Democrat. There is a plurality of people, though, that are a little bit of both. And I think if we can find that sweet spot, bring those people together and say that you've been hoodwinked, they've been trying to teach you that there's only a Republican way or a Democrat way, then maybe there is a third way. I think if we can find that and find young people that come together on issues of privacy, if we can find African Americans who are frankly open and aware that the criminal justice system has had a racial outcome, that are willing to fix it, and that there are Republicans willing to fix it, I think we transform that vote. If we do, there hasn't been, I ask people, has there been a transformational election? What is the transformational election you can tell me about? And someone will say, well, the first African American president. And I'll say, well, no, what he did is he maximized the same people who have always voted Democrat. He didn't really change things. What would be a transformational election is if all of a sudden a significant part of the African American population, Asian American population, Hispanic population, all of a sudden woke up and said, you know what? Maybe there are some who are talking about a third way. Maybe I am economically conservative, but maybe I'm also concerned with privacy. Or maybe I think that the foreign policy should be such that going towards the last resort, not the first resort. I think as you see the attacks, as this message is doing so well, and you see some of the attacks, some from my own party against me, they're afraid. They're afraid that the third way may be big enough to win elections again, but it may leave behind the people who think war is the first resort, or that war is the only answer, or that they know best about, what kind of medical treatment you can seek. So I think that's the past. I think that's the old way, and in Washington it's still popular. But I think when you see it in the public, those days are numbered. And among the public, something big is happening. And the public is probably a decade ahead of what's going on in Washington. But I think if we take our message, suffuse it, encapsulate it, and sugarcoat it with optimism. We talk about how the great things that our policy is going to do to eradicate poverty, to get people jobs, to get people out of unemployment. I think if we can bring that message with a healthy dose of optimism, I think if we can present that message with the passion of Patrick Henry, but also, like the painter Robert Henry wrote, like a man coming over the hill singing. When we present our message with passion and with the hope and promise and optimism of a man coming over the hill singing, then we're going to be the dominant movement again. I hope you'll help me with it. Thank you very much.